Every time you watch a Hollywood movie with the phrase, based on a true story, remember, it's never the whole truth. And the Conjuring series is no exception. Sure, they're horror films, packed with moments designed to scare, but let's look at the facts. What real events are these movies claiming to be based on? And is everything the Warrens said actually true? I'd say this is a good time to hit that subscribe button, because while the Conjuring saga is one of my favorite horror franchises, there's no avoiding some uncomfortable truths. And there are plenty of them. Behind this series lie stories of fake paranormal investigators, multi-million-dollar scams, allegations of domestic violence, and much, much more. To understand why these movies sparked so much controversy, we need to talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren, the central figures in the Conjuring series, based on a real-life couple who called themselves demonologists. They became famous for investigating alleged supernatural events. Over the decades, they claimed to have encountered families haunted by ghosts, demons, and other entities from the other side, or at least that's the version they shared in interviews, public talks, books, and television appearances. But as they built a devoted following, the Warrens also attracted plenty of critics. Several neurologists pointed out the lack of solid or even verifiable scientific evidence. The couple's proof was limited to photographs and recordings that were almost impossible to authenticate. Suspicion grew when some skeptics offered to accompany them on investigations, and the Warrens always refused. Additional criticism came from author Ray Garton, who worked with them on the book In a Dark Place, The Story of a True Haunting, about an alleged haunting in a Connecticut home. After its release, Garton said the Warrens often embellish details to keep the narrative engaging and make it sound far more frightening. Despite the controversies, the Warrens remained prominent public figures, and by the early 2000s, they had caught Hollywood's attention. New Line Cinema gave the green light to a film titled The Conjuring, with James Wan, one of the rising names in the genre, set to direct. The plan was to stick closely to the couple's investigations, even if the final product would be presented as fiction. Both the studio and Wan knew that if the film succeeded, it could pave the way for adapting more stories from the Warren case files. New Line Cinema had already scored big with other horror franchises, and Wan had proven his ability to build cinematic worlds with Saw and Insidious. By the time pre-production on The Conjuring began in 2011, Lorraine was already a widow. Ed had died a few years earlier. Even so, she agreed to join the project as a creative consultant. Her husband had always believed their supernatural experiences were meant for the big screen. Lorraine supported Wan's and New Line Cinema's vision, but she included one condition in her contract. The film could portray only the couple's professional work, never their personal life. It seemed the team behind The Conjuring had taken every precaution, but none of it was enough to stop the wave of controversy that followed. Set in 1971, The Conjuring follows the Perron family, who have just moved into a large house in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where Roger and Carolyn plan to raise their 5 daughters. Their quiet life is quickly shattered when they begin experiencing a series of unexplained events, starting with strange noises and escalating to terrifying apparitions. Desperate for help, Roger and Carolyn turn to the Warrens. The investigators conclude that the property is haunted by Bathsheba Sherman, a witch who sacrificed her own child to the devil and took her own life in 1863, cursing the land before she died. Even worse, she possesses Carolyn, forcing the Warrens to carry out an exorcism. The film's success took even its creators by surprise. Made on a $20 million budget, it went on to earn $320 million worldwide. Audiences were drawn to the story, the scares, and, most of all, the Warrens. A new generation came to admire the couple and grew curious about their real-life investigations. Wan and the entire New Line Cinema team celebrated the achievement. Lorraine was equally pleased, joining the promotional tour and impressing the press with her clairvoyant abilities. Everyone had reason to celebrate, except the Warrens' critics. Long-standing accusations of deceit resurfaced with unusual intensity. Some Rhode Island historians presented evidence showing that Sherman had indeed existed and committed an atrocity against her child, but had survived, been acquitted in court, later had another child, and lived to old age. Differing opinions also came from within the Perron family. Carolyn had passed away before the film's release, but the rest of the family shared their views. Andrea, one of the daughters, said the movie did reflect the ordeal they endured. She had already told those events, and more, in her book House of Darkness, House of Light. Still, she and her sisters admitted that Wan and his team took several creative liberties, especially in the climax depicting Carolyn's exorcism. Andrea explained that, in reality, it was a slow, drawn-out process, while the movie portrayed it as shorter and far more violent. Years later, it was confirmed that it hadn't been a formal exorcism at all, but a ritual of deliverance, since the Warrens were laypeople and not authorized by the Catholic Church to perform exorcisms. Even so, Andrea said the changes made sense. After all, it was a Hollywood film. She also revealed that years earlier, Lorraine and New Line Cinema had offered her mother a large sum of money to tell her story, but Carolyn refused and asked them never to contact her again. While the daughters agreed the movie was inspired by real events, their father, Roger, saw it differently. At first, he claimed the supposed supernatural activity was nothing more than his family's imagination. Andrea explained that because he worked as a jewelry salesman, he spent most of his time away from the house. Over time, Roger admitted that something wasn't right within those four walls, and in 1980 the family moved out. Even so, it was clear he had never been comfortable with the Warrens' involvement. He believed they unsettled his family and created chaos in the home. Things reached a breaking point the night the couple performed the ritual of deliverance. The situation spiraled so far out of control that Roger threw them out. The controversy surrounding The Conjuring didn't go unnoticed by Lorraine or the filmmakers. The psychic said the movie accurately portrayed what she, Ed, and the Perron family had lived through. She explained that she worked closely with Juan to keep the story as true to the case as possible, even staying on set during filming. She added that many people questioned the events simply because they refused to believe in the existence of evil. Juan, for his part, made it clear the film was a work of fiction, not a documentary. The debate over the accuracy of The Conjuring could have hurt the movie, but it had the opposite effect. It fueled public interest and convinced New Line Cinema to move forward with a sequel and start planning a full franchise. Lorraine was once again brought on by the filmmakers to help develop the second film. This time, the story would draw from another case, one that was already controversial before it ever made it to the screen. The Conjuring 2 took place in 1977, when the Warrens traveled to England to investigate a case that was all over the news. In the London district of Enfield, the Hodgson family is haunted by strange noises and objects moving on their own, a phenomenon known as a poltergeist. The disturbances centered on Janet, one of the daughters, who levitates and appears to be under the control of a dark entity. The Warrens conclude that the spirit of Bill Wilkins, the home's former owner, is lingering there, but that he is being used by a demon to take possession of Janet. Just like the filmmakers hoped, The Conjuring 2 was another big hit in 2016, and it even got better reviews than the first movie. Juan, New Line Cinema, and Lorraine once again had plenty to celebrate, until fresh criticism started coming in. The real Enfield poltergeist case lasted way longer than what you see in the movie. It went on for 2 years and involved several paranormal investigators. Many of them said the Warrens were barely involved. In reality, the ones doing most of the work were inventor Maurice Grosse and writer Guy Lyon Playfair, both from the Society for Psychical Research. Lorraine, Juan, and New Line Cinema admitted that was true. Still, Juan chose to condense the story into just a few days and keep the focus on the Warrens to stick with the storyline from the first film. He was building a cinematic universe, and the studio wanted to protect that at all costs. So Grosse ended up as a side character, and Playfair didn't make it into the script at all. The biggest controversy focused on Janet. In a 1980 interview, she admitted that she and her sister Margaret had faked some of the poltergeist activity. In the photos where she was supposedly levitating, she was really just jumping. And that deep, raspy voice she used when she was possessed was actually a vocal trick. That's how they managed to fool both the investigators and the press. Even so, she said that other paranormal events were real and genuinely terrifying. She returned to the media years later as an adult during the film's promotion and kept saying that, liberties aside, it still captured the fear and desperation she and her family went through. The Conjuring 2 also sparked debate over another case the Warrens had looked into. Early in the film, the couple holds a spirit session in Amityville, the house that, back in the 70s, was considered the most famous haunted house in the world. It had inspired a book and an entire series of movies, but later investigations pointed out inconsistencies in the Lutz family's stories about the paranormal events they claimed to witness. And to this day, the case is still surrounded by doubt. The questions about how truthful The Conjuring 2 really was ended up being even louder than with the first movie, but Lorraine once again stepped in to defend it. She said the Enfield poltergeist was one of the most terrifying cases she had ever worked on, and that the film stayed true to what actually happened. When it came to Janet's admissions, she put forward a bold theory that the demon had manipulated her into making those statements to discredit her. That idea even made its way into one scene of the movie. Lorraine also pointed out that some things simply couldn't have been faked by a child, like heavy objects moving without anyone touching them. Most importantly, she insisted that the fear and suffering Janet and her family went through were very real. Juan backed up Lorraine's comments and reminded audiences that, at the end of the day, it was still a movie. That's why he allowed himself to take some creative liberties, adding 2 extra threats to the Enfield case: the Crooked Man, a monster that stalks Janet, and the demon Valak, who torments the Warrens in their personal life. That's when the Warrens' private lives came under intense attention. In both movies, they were shown as a wholesome, Catholic, and heroic couple. But that image began to crack shortly after The Conjuring 2 hit theaters, when The Hollywood Reporter published details that had never been made public before. 3 years earlier, a woman named Judith Penny had accused the couple of serious wrongdoing. She said that when she was 15, she lived with the Warrens and was in a romantic relationship with Ed, who was 30 at the time. According to her, Lorraine knew about the relationship and would even introduce her to others as their niece. Penny also claimed she became pregnant by Ed, but that Lorraine pressured her to end the pregnancy, apparently because she didn't want an illegitimate child to stain their legacy. Penny went on to say that Ed had been physically abusive toward Lorraine. Through her lawyer, Lorraine admitted meeting Penny when she was 18, explaining that she and Ed had taken her in when she needed a place to stay and let her look after their home while they were traveling. She denied every accusation, insisting Penny was being manipulated. Penny also confirmed she never received any payment from the movies. Even so, The Hollywood Reporter confirmed that Lorraine had included a clause in her contract to protect her privacy, which only fueled more questions. Meanwhile, New Line Cinema was accused of protecting the Warrens' image to safeguard their multi-million-dollar franchise. Penny's claims came as part of a lawsuit over the profits from The Conjuring, but beyond that, she never filed more charges against the family or spoke to the press again. In the middle of the scandal, Lorraine Warren left Los Angeles and returned to her home in Connecticut. She died of natural causes in April 2019 at the age of 92 and was buried next to Ed. The fallout from The Conjuring 2 could have easily thrown off the plans and hurt the reputation of both Warren and New Line Cinema. And with Lorraine no longer there to guide them, the future of the series seemed uncertain. Even so, the studio wasn't ready to walk away from the franchise and gave the green light for a third movie. This time, Warren stayed on as producer and handed the directing duties to Michael Chavez. But if they thought the controversies had ended, they were in for a surprise. The Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It took us to 1981, when the Warrens are called in by the Glatzel family because young David is possessed. During an exorcism, his brother-in-law, Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, pleads with the demonic entity to stop tormenting the boy and take him instead. David returned to normal, but Arna was no longer the same. In the days that followed, he begins seeing terrifying visions and eventually attacks his boss. He's arrested and put on trial, with his defense arguing that he's not guilty because the devil made him commit the crime. While they wait for the verdict, the Warrens dig into the source of the curse and discover a totem placed by a witch to target David. They have to find her and stop her before she can follow through with her dark intentions. The movie made less money than the earlier installments, but it was still a big success. More importantly, it brought the Glatzel-Johnson case back into the public eye. To this day, it's the only time a defendant has stood in court and claimed they committed a crime because they were under the control of demonic forces, a defense the court rejected as unprovable and unscientific. Johnson was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison, but was released after 5 for good behavior. Juan and his team kept those facts in the movie, but built a detective-style storyline around the Warrens, adding Satanism, a priest with a disturbing past, and scenes where Ed himself becomes possessed and nearly turns on Lorraine. Even though the filmmakers were upfront about taking creative liberties, the controversy didn't go away. The media brought back a 2006 lawsuit filed by Carl Glatzel Jr., David's older brother, accusing the Warrens of exploiting their family and taking advantage of David, who was dealing with mental health problems. Members of the Glatzel family, along with Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, spoke out in the 2023 documentary The Devil on Trial. In it, Carl Jr. repeated his accusations and added that David had been taking Sominex, a sedative that could have caused hallucinations. He claimed the demonologists, and David's own mother, used that to present his condition as a case of demonic possession for financial gain. In the same documentary, Johnson still claims he's innocent, though he admits he did challenge the demon during the exorcism. Carl Glatzel Jr.'s comments landed a heavy blow on The Conjuring 3. With Lorraine no longer there to defend the film, Juan and New Line Cinema could only lean on the same line they'd used before, that it was a movie, not a documentary. Still, just like in the past, the controversy ended up working in the film's favor. Lorraine, for her part, never lost the respect of her loyal followers, who continued to emphasize how important she had been to the case. During that time, several outlets also revisited the words of Debbie Glatzel, David's sister and Johnson's partner, who was convinced the possession was real and held on to that belief until her death in 2021. The Conjuring saga seemed destined to attract controversy, but nothing stopped it from becoming a mainstay of pop culture. Wan and New Line Cinema kept the phenomenon alive with multiple spin-offs based on other cases or demons from the franchise, like the Annabelle doll and the Nun. These movies also drew plenty of criticism from skeptics, but their monsters have become cemented as horror icons. Now, Chavez is set to direct The Conjuring Last Rites, the fourth and final entry in the Warrens' case files. This time, the story takes inspiration from the haunting of the Smurl family, who were tormented by demons in their home. It's remembered as the one case the Warrens couldn't solve, at least in real life. The Conjuring saga perfectly shows how real events can be reworked once they're turned into Hollywood movies. It leaves one big question: how far can filmmakers stray from what truly happened and still claim it's based on a true story? With paranormal cases, the doubts and controversies have been even more intense, sometimes uncovering secrets that were far too personal. Whether all of it was true or not, it proves that sometimes movies can leave a deeper impact than reality itself.